Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, a regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk at the Nasdaq market site, as well as remotely, we have Bernardo Garcia, investor, advisor, and entrepreneur of the Americas Partnership Investor Network, Yoshi Yokokawa, founder and CEO of Alpaca, Carlos Marmolejo, co-founder and CEO of Finsus, and Rodrigo Verduzco, co-founder of RUUT. We're here to discuss the importance of financial inclusion in LatAm and Mexico, challenges and the role technology plays in breaking down those barriers. It is great to have everyone on the desk, as well as Bernardo joining us remotely from Miami. Let's go around the table quickly. Yoshi, we'll start it off with you. Give us an overview of Alpaca, where you sit within the ecosystem.
Sure. Alpaca is a U.S. headquartered self-clearing broker-dealer and also API-first brokerage infrastructure company. So we support 200 financial institutions across the globe, including RUUT. So we support like a lot of companies in the different parts of the world.
Right, and tell us about Finsus, where you are.
Finsus is a digital financial institution in Mexico. Our mission is to help build wealth through savings and investment in long-term investments for Mexicans.
And we will get into that in just a moment. RUUT, tell us what you have going on there, where you're in the ecosystem.
Perfect. Yeah, we like to say we're the investment platform for non-investors, right? So we're trying to build a product that really helps people get through their door and start building wealth in a very new, digital, and fun way.
Yeah, and Bernardo, it's interesting. I'm looking at some of the notes here, and the penetration rates in LatAm are shockingly low. However, that opens up a lot of opportunity within the region. So when you're thinking about the work you're doing at the network and what investments are attractive, tell us more holistically what's happening there.
Yeah, at Felix, we're trying to leverage existing technology to get people to adopt digital solutions in their own way. For example, Latin America still presents huge opportunities for adoption, and at Felix, we make it, for customers, we make it as easy as sending a text on WhatsApp for them to be able to remit money abroad. So meeting them where they are is how we think the adoption can actually happen in Latin America.
Yeah, and part of that penetration rate and why it's so low, Rodrigo, is just having exposure and accessibility to savings and building trust within that system. Tell us more why you think the penetration rate has been so low.
Yeah, I think historically, and for context, I mean, in a country of 130 million people, in 2019, there were less than 200,000 accounts, right, for brokerages. That's just unbelievable, in my opinion. That's why we quit our jobs and built this, right? But I think it's definitely a matter of education. A lot of people are not saving enough, definitely not building wealth in the ways they should be. There's definitely an issue of trust in some institutions. And historically, people, I mean, they do literally save under the mattress, right? So we were trying to build a way to getting people to at least save under a digital mattress, where we're at least giving them a debit card or something that gives them some interest on their cash is better, strictly better. But definitely building a way so they can access more sophisticated products in a way without needing to know how to, right. Like building a platform that advises them and gets them through the door and start building wealth. Definitely our mission, and that's how we think we're gaining their trust.
Yeah, I would also argue it could be generational as well, where perhaps money isn't spoken about in the household, and now having access to mobile devices and platforms is what's giving newer investors exposure.
Yes, definitely the opportunity that we have using mobile phones
right.
to educate people and to incorporate them to very easy financial products, that is the goal, because we have a great opportunity using technology right now for everybody. You don't need to be sophisticated. You don't need to be to understand some financial products. You just need to know how to save money, how to operate this, and the rest, the computer can help you to have a better health, financial health in your life.
Well, a part of it too, when we think about it from Alpaca's perspective, it's having the infrastructure to be able to do that, because there are billions of people around the world who don't have traditional central banks or trusted banking systems. Yeah. So now being able to open this up with a digital asset and emerging infrastructure is what provides that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the reason why it's a lot of people underbanked is the minimum fee is really, really high. So in order to really reduce the fee, the running cost has to become really, really low. In order to do that, we had to build a bunch of that stuff internally. Because if you outsource those systems outside, the running cost becomes super high. Hence, the service provider has to charge minimum high, very high. So I think that is really reason why that now technology is helping this financial inclusion to be actually happening in the world.
And I also think, like, for example, in the Finsus case or ours, where, I mean, you're able to translate this digital infrastructure to savings and then through better rates to your customers, like in your case, or through very cheap management fees. And so you really can building robust infrastructure that perhaps does not depend on the traditional networks. You're also able to build products that are cheaper, better, more scalable, and more clearly understandable for end users.
Yeah, I mean, the scalability part is key too. Bernardo, let's go back to you for a moment here. When you think about perhaps the institutional challenges and the role that technology is playing to break down those barriers, tell us where you see those challenges and how technology is helping, whether it's finance or other industries, to evolve.
Yeah, I think historically, especially speaking about Latin America, it was very hard to get people to access financial products, mostly because serving them via traditional ways used to be very expensive. So the people that need it the most are the ones that actually tend to pay the highest fees. Now, with technology and everything that's happening, now we can serve anyone at virtually no cost. It doesn't matter where they are. So those costs and that really barrier that existed before is completely removed. Now, what amazes me is the countries that have been able to leapfrog all these infrastructure challenges and just have gone directly to like mobile payments, for example, or mobile wallets. And so that to me is the biggest opportunity. How do we go to the people that are not yet digitized and actually get them into the financial system via creative solutions?
Yeah, well, what's interesting with that is since there were no legacy institutions, it almost leapfrogged, which is why they're able to access it or certainly adopt it faster than other areas of the world are. You know, think about it in the US, there's a lot of integration. We're still going to have traditional institutions, whereas without those existing central banks, you were able to implement that technology and not even just for savings, but that's what helps to form alternative forms of capital formation, build local microeconomies, cross-border payments. You essentially leapfrogged over us.
Yeah, and I also, in that respect, for example, countries that, and you see banks that are trying to transition to digital models or brokerages that are trying to transition to digital models sometimes have more problems doing so versus someone that was born digital, right? So I think it's sort of the same. Once you're born with this mentality of really trying to really bridge those gaps or really build that infrastructure so that these new types of financial products scale, you're way more able to do so. And you see it in, for example, Africa, where you had these text-based banks way before, because they were just sending airtime. You're seeing those same replicable models, then using technology, you can really leapfrog around the existing regulation, well, the infrastructure, and adapt regulation to really build models that do scale.
Right. Yoshi, it's also incumbent on the industry with neobanks. Accessibility is one thing, but providing that education and supporting newer investors, that's a big part of the calculus as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, like as Rodrigo said, like, it's really important to keep providing education, and because how to scalably provide education also has to be very digitized. And I think that's why like younger generation actually has the advantage to be receiving those high-tech products.
Yeah.
100%.
Let's talk about the regions from a higher level here. Tell us about the market landscape in Mexico more generally.
Generally, 30% of the population in Mexico has access to the formal financial system. So we have a huge challenge there. That is why we see a bank branch in every mobile phone, no? And that is really important because the name of the game is changing right now for the traditional banks, because we can build a new ecosystem around the country where each person can have access to the financial system basically from anywhere, no? And that is fantastic.
Yeah. What stood out to me in the notes that you provided from RUUT, less than 12% have an active investment account. That's a big disparity from the 40% that was just mentioned in terms of access to banking, but even still 40%, that's a low number.
Super low, but again, I mean, thinking that almost 5 years ago you had only 200,000 investment accounts is ridiculous, right? And that's why we're doing what we're doing. And again, I mean, we're very proud. Something that we're very proud about is 80% of our users are first-time investors. So really being able to to build products that are driving that inclusion through simplicity, through understanding, and perhaps I think it's the new way to do it. Like for us, being the investment platform for non-investors is way more than a sales slogan. It's how we build product, right? It's how we think about what we're putting out there. It's how, and every time I sit at a table in Mexico City, I mean, no matter how sophisticated the people are, you sit at a table and you say, we're investment for non-investors, and always someone raises their hand. Like, we need that. And I think that approach to products everywhere is very necessary, like built for the non-customer. And this way I think us and a lot of players are building very, very good products that are bridging that gap. Because before you had to know how to invest to start investing. Mm-hmm. Now you don't necessarily, right? And I think those approaches to different parts of that financial inclusion spectrum are very important.
Yeah, Eduardo, I wanted to ask you, the LatAm region as a whole, what's the regulatory environment there as it relates to bringing neobanks and fintech and innovative companies online? Are they developing those frameworks, or are the frameworks in place? Or are they excited to provide some leadership in these innovative products?
Yeah, I believe the conditions are there, and right now it's a pretty incredible time, both for investors to be thinking about investing in the region, because there's so much opportunity still left to be covered in Latin America. As you said earlier, 30% penetration of formal financial services. There's already north of 80% of smartphone penetration, which means people are already online. So that's a ton of opportunity for investors, but then that's also a ton of opportunity for builders. People that are thinking about, how do I bridge those gaps? And I believe policymakers have already set up the right frameworks for people to just go in and start building. So for me, it excites me very much that the capital is there, and you obviously see it via initiatives like the America's Partnership Investor Network, where there's a massive pledge to invest in the environment. So it's the time to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and Eduardo, one more question for you. Fintech is such a broad term. Are there specific areas in fintech that are more attractive than others? How are you thinking about allocating investments within the context of fintech?
Look, to be honest, I believe that everything in fintech is still a massive opportunity. Obviously, we have a personal bias towards cross-border payments because that's the problem that we're currently tackling. And it excites us a lot because at least when we look at where cross-border payments to Latin America are originated, the vast majority are coming from the US. But of those, roughly 70% are still originated in cash, and more than 70% are still paid out in cash in the region. Carlos earlier said that some people save under the mattress, and we actually see that. We see people sending cash remittances even though they're using that money to save, but they still don't have a financial institution that they trust to save those funds. So we see the opportunities everywhere.
Yeah, no, it's certainly, I mean, the total addressable market is huge.
No, and something that's very interesting in LatAm is one of, you have the added value in which doing fintech is really a win-win, because it has huge social impact, right? So you do have massive tailwinds. For example, helping people save. It's super underpenetrated. It's super concentrated. You have a lot of opportunity to build there. So helping people invest, you have a lot of opportunity there. Cross-border, having fairer products, having easily flowing money is very important to a lot of families. But also, for example, boosting SME growth. Like, you have all these tailwinds that a developing economy brings to the table, but also that ability to really build a product that's a very good business that has a lot of impact as well. In our case, in your case, like having people save and invest for the first time is also a great thing to do.
Yeah, it's interesting when you start to think of yourself as an investor. That's one of the ways that you label yourself. And you pointed this out in Alpaca's note that more than 55% are women in RUUT's case that are investing. So it's kind of cool to think of yourself as an investor in addition to, a woman.
And I think like what's interesting is like, that there's a word of trust that, continues to pop up. And I think like, it's interesting that how the RUUT, trying to basically clear this hurdle of the trust gap. And I think like, that's what you're doing with education, right? And I feel like, you mentioned about creative solution to go over the gap. And I think that's the key, because I feel like that really didn't exist until like what you're doing right now. And I think like that is a massive opportunity. And I think that creative solution is really the key, how to get to the everyone basically in the LatAm and Mexico.
Right.
And you can include everybody, independently of the age, if they are women, men, who cares, no? And that is a fantastic thing and the opportunity that we have to include the whole population through the technology.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point that I had a panel last week focusing more on APAC, and one of my guests had said, I can't believe I am an investor now. So to your point,
100%.
Right, you have to use the products and the platforms to understand what this means. Just having an account and not doing anything with it, it's incumbent on investors to be proactive when it comes to their education.
Yeah, you can don't spend those $10 on a coffee, buy $10 of Starbucks stock, and now you're an investor. And people are, really? And it's unbelievable, right? For a country where here I think the average American has 2 investment platforms, right? It's amazing to think that there's a country where less than 2% has, and it's so close by and with such big tailwinds in terms of the demographics, the economy. And I think it's a very, very interesting market to look at.
It definitely is. And Carlos, at the end of the day, this is also how you bridge those wealth gaps that we keep hearing about, where you're self-sufficient and you're not relying on other sources to help plan for your retirement. But that is how you bridge these wealth gaps. And I think that's an important distinction as well.
It is really important. For example, when I have a conversation with my mom, Mom, you can be an investor from $1, from $2, to say, can I? No, really? And that is possible now. No? If I want to keep money for the future, if I want to save money for the future, and when I think that I can save money from $1 for my application, that's amazing. No?
Yeah.
That's a great opportunity that we have to save more money and to have a better future.
Yeah, and that was impossible until very recently, because like if it wasn't a digital bank, then people are actually doing the paperwork that actually costs money. So you need to require higher deposit amount. So
and me and my Carlos, my co-founder, always say it's a new world, but you're still selling broccoli in a candy store. Like you still have to get people like interested enough. You have to make it easy enough, approachable enough, so that even the most like the very, very beginner can start dabbling at building wealth.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, even if you think about it from an institutional perspective, Yoshi, look at the tools that are available now to retail investors relative to what we had on the institutional desk 20, 25 years ago. It's hard to wrap your head around that, just how advanced the platforms are for retail investors.
yeah, exactly. And I think that is really the key of the technology innovation and the word that we keep talking about, the fintech. Because like if it's not scalable, it's not really fintech. Because what's available to the institutions has to be available for the people who can only invest in $1. That's a really power of the scalability and technology.
And in addition, imagine that you can save money when you are spending money. No, there is the tricky game that now we can play with the technology. No, every time that I spend money, I can save maybe $1, 50 cents, and that is important because you are doing every moment. No?
That's how I rationalize it in my head. Anyway, all right, guys, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.